The West African Economic Bloc, ECOWAS, has for decades been seen as a beacon of hope on the continent. This is in comparison to the East African Community, the Arab Maghreb Union in the Northern African region, and SADC in Southern Africa. But until Tuesday, when three Sahel nations, Burkina Faso, Mali and Niger, served divorce papers on ECOWAS, questions are now being asked about what the West African Economic Bloc leadership and stability will look like. For more on this discussion, we're now joined by African analyst, Advocate Sipho Mantula. Advocate, thank you so much for your time and for joining us this evening. Now, the three junta-led countries have decided in full sovereignty to withdraw from the bloc, accusing ECOWAS of abandoning their founding ideals. What political impact will this have on the people of these regions?
Evening, Katlego, even to your viewers and Jumbo Africa. Katlego, it is very important, as you have said earlier on your intro, that ECOWAS was the beacon of hope in the West Africa region. But I think if we can take your viewers back, I think 3 years ago, since 2020, when you had this military coups in the Sahel, ECOWAS had a tough time how to deal with these military leaders. And now, once you have seen the move out of the three major countries, moving out of what we will call ECOWAS, now it's ECOWAS, as others are now saying. The first political impact, Katlego, will be also the freedom of movement amongst the citizens in the 15 member states. Remember that when you talk of ECOWAS, we are talking of a structure, a regional body that was formed in the early 70s, in 1975. And some of the founding fathers were the Pan-Africanists. Now, these leaders are now accusing ECOWAS of moving away from the political ideology of Pan-Africanism to become a technocratic tool of European power. So one looks at the political impact, economic impact, and cultural impact. So that impact will also deal with, like I said earlier, the freedom of movement. It will also deal with the issues around the trade deficit that will affect the ECOWAS region. And hence, Nigeria under Bola Ahmed Tinubu is facing these challenges, how to deal with three military leaders who have pulled out. And remember, again, you have to give a 1 year notice before you can pull out. But they opted to serve the papers of moving out of ECOWAS basing on what we have said earlier. And it is not only the issues of sanctions that they have raised, but they have raised that ECOWAS have failed also to assist their countries to fight counter-terrorism.
Speaking of that 1 year notice that they should have put in, I mean, the ECOWAS rules state that the finalization of an exit will take up to a year. So given the move that they've made currently, what should we anticipate in this period?
I think what we should anticipate, I was expecting to hear an emergency meeting of ECOWAS, but what I picked up also during the week, Ouagadougou from the Burkina Faso, they have already said that there's nothing that will change their decision of going back, despite the AU also have been putting pressure, saying that it is important for these three member states to engage further with the ECOWAS leadership. And remember that these sanctions that were being threatened, the military intervention, because the three countries, Niger, Mali, Burkina Faso, they are very important in the region, despite their challenges that they've been having. But also one looks at that the impact also is looking at what we knew as the French hegemony and the French alliance in the Sahel region. Now the three countries are moving towards Russia now. So that changes the geopolitics of the Sahel region, that they won't rely on the regional economic body alone. And one looks also maybe at the AU level. The AU might be concerned also about what will be their voice at the coming summit of the AU that is coming within a week now, to say how is the new chairperson of the AU, Algeria, is going to deal with West Africa when they have 15 member states. Now they've been reduced to 12 member states.
I mean, we know that some analysts, especially those that are within the regions, are arguing that it's unjust of Mali to be one of the ones standing against ECOWAS, given how ECOWAS was at the helm of assisting Mali when over 10 years ago civil war broke out in that region. What's your take on that?
No, correctly, but remember that the leadership of ECOWAS rotates every year. And even if you have raised that issue, the issue is that Mali, Assimi Goïta, Traore, and General Chini, what they've picked up from ECOWAS is their tendency for being very strict against them, pushing them to go for the elections. And these countries, like I've said, they had a project to deal with the French hegemony. They had a project to deal with the French imperialism. Hence, most of these countries moved away from using French as their official language. They've moved also to deal with the issues of economic deficit of their countries, which they have raised, that it appears that ECOWAS is relying on the Western powers for advice. It seems that they are no longer relying on what I said is the African way of dealing with the conflict in the Sahel region. So if you can look also, Niger also had the same problem when Bazoum was removed from power, that ECOWAS threatened to intervene militarily. And remember that was another standoff that we saw from late 2023. So it is important for us to understand that even if they've been helped previously, I think the new dimension, the new geopolitics of the Sahel has also put ECOWAS under pressure to say that how do we deal with these three military leaders? And not only the three. I might not have talked about Guinea-Conakry, Guinea-Bissau, because those are the countries also that have been having challenges with ECOWAS as well as the Gambia.
I mean, one of the benefits of ECOWAS is citizens holding a community passport, like you mentioned earlier on, that doesn't require visa applications when they're moving from one country to another within that bloc. What will those ramifications be with regards to freedom of movement for the people in those regions?
No, definitely it will affect the border movement, it will affect the trade, and one will assume that the three member states who have pulled out, they might be trading amongst the three countries. Definitely it will affect citizens severely. But one will assume that probably they will engage again to say that even if we have pulled out of ECOWAS, don't punish the citizens, because it is at a high level when leaders opted to take this decision without even a referendum, because they never ask their citizens about how they view, what is their opinion on the governance of ECOWAS as a regional economic body. So definitely it will affect what I earlier called cultural relations. It will affect the social cohesion amongst the ECOWAS region. Hence, it now becomes ECOWAS, having 15 member states reduced to 12 member states.
I mean, when we move away from the political and the social and the cultural impact that this will have, ECOWAS is a free trade movement. The already imposed sanctions on these junta-led countries have had dire economic impacts. Will members of these countries further feel the pinch should this exit now go on in the way that it would, or would they possibly rather find more economic expression?
One will assume that even if you look at the trade deficit that has been raised by economists, that almost 150 billion will be an impact of the three countries moving out of ECOWAS region. I've said earlier that these three countries have moved towards Kremlin. It means Putin has been engaging with these leaders to say, but even if ECOWAS is punishing you, even if France is punishing you, Kremlin and Moscow will be at your rescue. And hence we have seen the three leaders have been making some moves, what I call shuttle diplomacy, to go to Russia and engage on issues of development. So you can see that they are moving towards Russia. They are also moving around what they will call the Sahel Federation. Remember that the issue of the Sahel Federation was mooted last year from Guinea-Conakry, from Niger, Mali, Burkina Faso. So one looks at that these new military leaders are now opting to move out from this economic hegemony, economic domination that is led by ECOWAS, but ECOWAS having a proxy of the former colonial masters. And hence there is this need for us to can reboot the economic trade in the African region. Despite that we have Africa continental free trade, but these countries are going to have a challenge now on the Western Union, the currency impact in the ECOWAS region, which also has this tendency of being dominated by their former colonizers, either the French or the Belgians, and also by the US dollar. So you have this challenge that of the currency that will come, but one will assume that they've moved towards Russia, and Russia has become the new ally to the Sahel region.
In a minute, I do want us to continue touching on the influence that Russia has, especially on these three junta-led countries. But ECOWAS has also called for Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso to return to civilian rule. With this exit, are there any chances of these countries attaining democracy?
I will assume so, Katlego, because it has been taking so long for these military leaders to can reconfigure their governance system. But what they have done, which is very clever, they've put the prime ministers, their executive, to become civilians. But when you look at the power has been militarized. So that is the challenge that I think the African Union, when it meets in Addis Ababa, they should look at these issues around the military coups. What are the push and the pull factors, and why there is a deficit and a delay of transition of power from the military to the civilians. Look at the case in point of Sudan. We've been struggling with Sudan since the removal of Omar al-Bashir and the coming of Hamdok at some point, and you have two generals. So when you look at the script of West Africa, we still have it in East Africa, and that's where the issue of African democracy becomes challenged, to say that will these countries opt to go for African governance, or they will opt to go for military-led governments, because the military-led governments in West Africa has been the norm, including the current chairperson of ECOWAS, Nigeria. It has been having military leaders for even some time. It's only the change of Bola Tinubu, who is not a military leader. So I think militarization of power in Africa is a challenge, and for the African Union to deal with promoting African democracy and the African Charter on governance, elections, and democracy. I think maybe we have to change the way democracy is being defined, but we need to also understand what were the push and the pull factors that have led to these military juntas to take power.
So, Advocate, in closing, going back to the issue of Russia and its influence on these countries, I mean, the West has been very uneasy about Russia's growing influence in that region. Is this influence set to grow now even more with the exit? And could there be a possibility of these countries, rather than joining the BRICS plus bloc in the future?
No, definitely. Remember, there were many members last year that were mentioned that they've got an interest. But I think the appetite of Russia in the Sahel region is based on the issue that these countries had with France, which include the economic domination by the French, militarily, politically, culturally, economically. But also, as you are saying, the BRIC Plus expansion also has opened a new avenue for many countries. You look at Ethiopia, you look at Egypt, they are the new members of the BRIC Plus. We look at the Arab member states are now becoming part of the BRICS. But one will have assumed that these three member states, even if they move from ECOWAS, they will need to be consistent also at the AU level. They need to be consistent at the UN level. But also, as you said, economic trading partners, they must move away from global north to global south. And that's where Russia, as the chairperson of the BRICS in 2024, it might definitely raise this appetite and also tempt these countries to join the BRIC Plus so that they can deal with their economic challenges. Hence, you have the BRICS Bank that might assist these three countries to come out of poverty but develop their own nation. And I go back to your question earlier again, how do we build African democracy and avoid illegal and sanctions that are not proper? Because we have sanctions that are actually hitting economies of countries and sanctions targeting leaders, but at the same time, we have ordinary citizens suffering from these economic illegal sanctions.
All right, Advocate Sipho Mantula, thank you so much for your time. Always interesting having a chat with you about Africa and where we possibly could see the continent going, especially in ensuring that the people of Africa are set, they're free, and are economically moving forward.